During the holiday season, a lot of attention is placed on romanticizing the family. Christmas movies and TV commercials portray happy reunions and joyful family gatherings. I'm sure many of you are old enough to remember those classic Kodak moment commercials that they used to run at Christmas time. But in reality, many families experience pain and loss, which become all the more acute during the holidays. Maybe a loved one has died during the past year or is actively in the process of dying. For some, old hurts inhibit them from wanting to be with family. A broken marriage may have split parents apart, and the holidays only make the parents and children think of how happy their family used to be. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer families today live up to the classic Norman Rockwell paintings that depict all family members living happily as one. Today's readings at first may sound like an idealized portrait of family life, but a closer look reveals a realistic understanding of what it takes to bring harmony into a home. The first reading in our responsorial psalm presents a theology of retribution or just rewards, which is typical of wisdom literature. If you do good, the book of Sirach says, good things will happen to you. If you do evil, bad things will happen to you. Thus the author writes, if you treat your father well, especially in his old age, you can expect a long life, children, atonement for sins, and answered prayers. I'm sure those words hold true for taking good care of mom when she's old too. But the Gospels illustrate that this theology of retribution, of getting what you deserve, does not always work. Those who do good and try to be true to God's ways in everything often endure great pain and suffering in their lives. Mary and Joseph were model followers of God and followed all the prescriptions of the Mosaic Law. Yet at the presentation of the 8-day-old Jesus in the temple, Simeon prophesied dire things for their baby Jesus, and that a sword will pierce Mary's heart with sorrow. At the Annunciation, Mary said yes, even as she questioned, how can this be, since she had not had relations with a man? What God asks of her places her in trying circumstances. But pondering things in her heart, faithfulness, love, and trust are three virtues Mary epitomizes to get through the times that present a challenge to harmonious family life. St. Paul adds 7 more virtues to that list in today's second reading. Heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. We would all do well to take each one of those virtues, one for each day of the week, and pray for a personal increase in each of them as a gift from God. Of course, love is the overall virtue that envelops and ties together all those other virtues. Today the church calls on us to meditate on the Holy Family. In doing so, we realize that just as celebrating the birth of Jesus helps us to respect how human life is created in the image of God, so our celebration of the Holy Family helps us to respect the notion of the human family as the image of the church. During the past week, many of us have been presented with opportunities to be with members of our families. And despite whatever problems might exist within our families, time spent together can help us realize an essential fact that is currently rejected by the world, but is proclaimed as truth by the church. That the family is the foundation of society, of all social life. The family, which is a tiny society in itself, teaches us how to be with others, which in turn positions us to carry out the second greatest commandment of Jesus, to love our neighbors as ourselves. This is why the church calls the family the domestic church. In middle age, a lot of us often fall prey to thinking that what we do for others or what we give to others is what matters most. But actually, those who have many more years of life under their belts come around to thinking, rightly, like the very young do. They recognize that time spent with others is much more valuable than things given to others. Now, spending time together on a regular basis may not seem to amount to too much. You may not think it's such a big deal. But the foundation that is built into a family by spending a lot of time together fosters the support of family members when they find themselves in a crisis. And all families find themselves in a crisis situation sooner or later. Take the Holy Family in today's gospel. For example, Joseph and Mary, still exhausted from their long trip to Bethlehem and still weary from searching unsuccessfully throughout Bethlehem for a decent place to stay, were forced, after the birth of Jesus in a stable, to leave their country at a moment's notice in the middle of the night and flee to the foreign country of Egypt out of fear of King Herod, who was out to kill the baby Jesus. Following these great sacrifices made during his infancy, Jesus grew up in the tiny town of Nazareth under the care of his foster father, St. Joseph, and his mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And there was nothing glamorous or spectacular about their existence there. At that time, Nazareth had a population of only 100 to 200 people. In fact, from the time he was a toddler to the time he was 30 years old, the only thing we know for sure that happened to Jesus was that Mary and Joseph found him in the temple after being lost for 3 days at the end of a family trip to Jerusalem for the Passover when he was 12 years old. Other than that, the first 30 years of Jesus' life were simple ones, in which for many of those years his mother and foster father made day-to-day sacrifices on his behalf, just like the sacrifices the mothers and fathers sitting here today have made for their children. The Holy Family certainly prayed together as a devout Jewish family, and they took whatever steps necessary to care for one another. After St. Joseph died, like any other family, Mary and her son Jesus carried on by themselves. But no matter what God asked of them, they prayed and acted together according to the Father's will. And the habits that the Holy Family adopted should be the habits of our own families. We should be willing to pray together and to pray for each other's well-being if we truly care for the members of our families. And we ought to be willing to make whatever sacrifices necessary to keep them safe from the dangers of the world. Among the most important things we need to do, and yet probably the most difficult of these sacrifices, is to be willing to forgive any family member who has hurt one or more members of the family. This is not always easy, but it's a major step toward family unity. Today, God and the Church present the Holy Family to us as a treasure. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were not only holy themselves, the examples they set help us to become holy. Let us give thanks to them for that and follow after them to strengthen our own families, and in turn bring an increase in the Spirit of God into a world that so desperately needs it. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, pray for us.